the hazards to health from nuclear power, including all three of the accidents. And what do you come up with? The most hazardous is coal. The second most hazardous is oil. The third most hazardous is natural gas. The fourth most hazardous is photovoltaic. The fifth is nuclear, and the most benign is wind. Okay, now, try and explain that to people, and you run into the problem that people are scared of what they have no control over. When you're in a plane, you have no control. When you're walking down the street, you think you're in complete control, except when this crazy character runs a red light and kills you in a crosswalk. But you think you're in control. With nuclear power, you're not in control. And with gas, well, you think you're in control until PG&E blows up a pipeline and wipes out your corner of things. This is a very hard story to get across. And in the United States, it is harder than it is most places. We have a lot of environmental groups which I think are not doing the public any service by their anti-nuclear activities. They'd do a lot better if they focused on better regulation of nuclear. We've got political problems. What to do with spent nuclear fuel has nothing to do with technology. It's entirely political. We know how to take care of it. We, even in the United States, have a geological repository that's working and taking fuel. Right now, it's in Carlsbad, New Mexico. It works well. But try and get one for the big civilian things, and you get into the politics again. I think nuclear should be part of the mix. I would love to see the fraction of world electricity generated by nuclear double. It's 16% of all world electricity now is generated by nuclear. France has the biggest chunk, 80%. We have 20%. Korea has 35%. Japan had 30%. And I would like to see the world average double, and I don't know whether it's going to happen or not. We'll find out. There are 2 nuclear power plants now under construction today in the United States. They're in Georgia. If those plants come in on time and on budget, I think you'll see nuclear back on track in the United States. If those plants come in many years late and billions of dollars over budget, then you're going to see nuclear pushed to the side. We know what nuclear plants cost in Japan and Korea. They're building them all the time. We haven't built one in 30 years in the United States, so the plants built here are going to cost considerably more because we have to build up the infrastructure again. But the power companies are concerned with diversity of supply. Yes, natural gas is hugely cheap today. What's it going to be tomorrow? Before the shale gas, it was $15 per million cubic feet. Now it's $2.50. How long is it going to stay that way? I don't know. They don't know. They want some hedges. That was a long answer to your question, but I like nuclear power.
Well, good. It is true that my French friends tell me that when we turn on the lights anywhere in France, that most of it's coming from along the banks of their famous river, where you see a plant every so many miles as you go down the Loire, or excuse me, the Rhone. And it's true that their German neighbors across the border on the Rhine have taken another attitude, and as you say, they might switch, given switching chancellors, et cetera.
Well, it's very funny because if you ask where the Germans are going to get the electricity they're going to lose by shutting down their nuclear power plants, they can get it from 2 places. One is from nuclear power generated in France, and the other is from coal-fired power plants with electricity generated in Poland. And because of a quirk in the Kyoto Protocol, the emissions are assigned to the country where the emissions is, not the country
user.
that's using this stuff. And the Polish economy's got a lot of room to increase its emissions. The Germans are supposed to decrease theirs, but by buying all this coal-fired power from Poland, they don't increase their.
One of the other parts of the article that you mentioned, or that I mentioned first and that you gave your assessment of, was when you got into the body of the argument that there are now in development very much improved safety devices to the newest reactors that are coming up, particularly the French one. And when we had the South Korean Consul General sitting where you're sitting just 2 months ago, and we pushed him on the issue because there's some people in Korea who think that what happened in Japan is, floating their way as residue, et cetera. He also said that the Koreans are determined to stay in that market, and it's a feasible market because they're now selling, as the French sell their technology abroad, so now the Koreans are selling their nuclear technology abroad. But if ever it comes about that I have Jane Fonda here, we've had a couple of film stars, I'll invite you back so that we can talk to Jane Fonda about nuclear power, because I think what you're trying to hint at is there are people who've used these issues in ways that indicate they don't know what they're talking about, but it comes out of a very good-looking person.
I don't know how many in the audience know this Jane Fonda reference, but the problem was the 3 Mile Island accident happened, and 10 days later, the China Syndrome movie was released. And the China Syndrome movie, starring Jane Fonda, the scenario was a reactor core meltdown, and the hot stuff melted through the reactor vessel, and it melted through the concrete floor, and could it ever be stopped before it melted all the way through the earth and came out in China? I don't know how Jane Fonda and the hero managed to solve this problem, but solve it that she did, and I would nominate her for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission rather than criticize her.
All right. I'll move on to another part of your book. What then can we do now, since we know all the things that we don't know, and we know a few things that we do know? Give us a scenario that you might take into the White House, to the next president, be it President Obama or someone else. What would you say to do now?
There is what I call a nonpartisan group who's trying to pull together something for the next administration that is politically practical. Because you can talk about greenhouse gases and emissions and all the rest of that all you want, but what you got to do is deal with an outfit that has Senator Inhofe's as well as having Mr. Waxman. So you've got the total political spectrum, which is why we are talking in this tone of energy in 3 dimensions. You get a different answer if you will talk about the economy, the national security, and the environment all together. So one element that one would want to do is something called a revenue-neutral carbon tax. Now, the Republicans say, tax, my God. But if you talk about revenue neutral, where you collect the money and then you give it back, then maybe you can actually do that. The Canadians have one in the province of Vancouver. It was put in by their conservative government some years ago. I talked to the woman who was the finance minister at the time. She said they had 3 ways of returning the money. They returned it to industry by lowering the corporate tax rate. They returned it to the private citizen in 2 forms. One form was a rebate on your taxes, and another for people who didn't make enough money to pay a lot of taxes was to give them a cash check. And so the people are all sort of happy about it. It's easier in Vancouver and British Columbia than it is in the U.S. And one of the problems in the U.S., for example, is that our southeast runs on coal. Our northwest runs on hydropower. So the northwest doesn't emit much, and the southeast emits a lot. So if you do this, revenue neutral, how are you going to return the money? That's a political issue. If it was me, I'd return half of the money collected from each state back to the state, and I'd take the other half in a big pool and distribute it all to people the way the Canadians did. That's one piece. The other piece is what to do about various energy sources. Shale gas, what should you do about that? I don't know whether people know that shale oil is now a very big deal too. The United States oil production, in fact, has gone up by 2 million barrels a day. Our internal consumption was going down, and it's turned around and gone back up. And if you just consider North America, Mexico, US, Canada, North America could be energy independent as far as oil goes in very little time. So there are these other policies on how to deal with a lot of things, including questions that relate to economics and security. Military's got a lot of interest in how to get themselves energy supplies at remote bases. They get a lot of kids killed transporting oil, diesel fuel in trucks across the mountains into Afghanistan. I don't know how many of you remember those pictures in the newspapers 3 or 4 months ago which showed all the burning tanker trucks on that road. They'd love to have more efficient systems. So efficiency should be a big piece of this. Tilting the playing field is what I call it on emission fees. Tilt it so that the broad economy will move in the direction that you want it to move. Tilting it a little bit is a lot better than trying to regulate every little bit of it. And so, as I say, there are a group of us trying to put together something to get to the next administration, whether it's Obama 2 or the Republican 1.
All right. I'm going to now turn this microphone over to some people who have better questions than I, because they don't drive a Prius like I do, so I get very good mileage, but they are now complaining.
Oh, we do better because my wife has a Chevy Volt.
Oh, my God, I should have known.
She, as we drove up here, we didn't use the Volt because it only goes 40 miles on electricity, but she's at 1,100 miles per gallon of gas now. Most days she doesn't use any. Okay.
I knew that when I met her, that she was fast. Here you go.
You gave good credit to President Obama's administration for the 54-mile-a-gallon legislation. I'm curious to know, a two-part question, what other high points or what other credits does he deserve for what he's done so far? And secondly, what do you think of his so-called all-of-the-above approach to the energy situation?
I think the all-of-the-above is the right way to be moving for now. And in fact, that's what I was sort of saying. Let's try and tilt the playing field and see that all the things that might help out in all three dimensions. I think Obama is focusing too much on just the environmental issue, and you bring in a lot more allies with a broader approach. But the everything, solar is good. Let's try and get its costs down. Wind, let's try and do better with backups. Gas, let's do something to make sure that fracking is done in an environmentally safe way. And the big thing is let's get rid of coal. So any way to do it, I would say, is good. The Obama administration and the first part, he didn't do anything to control Congress, and we tried to get this cap and trade bill, the Waxman-Markey bill, in. I found the Waxman-Markey bill had become so complicated and so clumsy that I didn't think it would work, and I didn't feel a bit bad when it failed in the Senate. So let's go with more miles per gallon. Let's go with a bit of everything approach, and let's turn up the knob on efficiency, which the administration has done through putting requirements on efficiency in all new federal buildings and also for retrofits in all the old federal buildings. Easier to start there, and that gives an opportunity to develop the technology and demonstrate it so it can then go into the broader sector.
Consul General of Indonesia has a question for you.
Not really a question actually, but it's a kind of observation, and also I would like to share with audience here what Indonesia has been doing in the last 5 years, because we once hosted the COP convention, and climate change conference in Bali in 2007. One thing that I would like to share with Dr. Richard is Indonesia is very committed to reduce its carbon dioxide emissions 26% by 2020 with business as usual. But if we could, because Indonesia is a non-Annex 1 country, if we could have what we call is adaptation fund and transfer of technology, most countries like Indonesia could reduce its emission until the level of 40%. That's one thing. And the other thing, in Indonesia, during the COP convention in Bali, Indonesia was proposing REDD, reduction emission from forest degradation and forest deforestation. So this is two big proposals that introduced by Indonesia during the COP convention in Bali. Another thing, I would like to seek your clarification also, because you referred to Montreal Protocol. Indonesia is also very committed to reduce the substance that deplete ozone layers. One element, if we would like to copy what the Montreal Protocol have been successful to adopt it into the climate change conventions to reduce CO2, I think we have to refer to phasing out of reduction or emission. For instance, you refer to the need of 15 countries as emitters in carbon dioxide to start a very strong commitment to emission reductions. So this is my comment or my questions about the relationship between Montreal Protocol and also COP, because you said that you quite not disagree with the Kyoto Protocol approach to reduce CO2. Thank you.
Well, I hope you hold strong on that in Indonesia, because I'm going to Bali next year, and I don't want those beaches all messed up by this.